in D&D. So, today we have a book review. Sorry if this ended up being posted a little bit late. I completely forgot that today was Wednesday, to be honest. I thought it was still Tuesday. I don't know why I thought that. So anyways, I want to talk about a little bit of tarot and introduction to reading tarot. So, this is part of what I've been calling in my head the A Little Bit series, which has 24 books that's written by an expert in their field. Each one covers some sort of like unconventional or off, quote unquote, off the path, probably for the more Western audience. There's, they talk about crystals and dreams and chakras and meditation and Wicca and auras. Like, each of them is a basic introduction to that. I will admit I got really pulled into researching tarot because I've been watching Aphrodite. If you're interested, I'll try to remember to link him in the description. He's scarily accurate. So I decided the best way to go is with the Little Bit series, because even though they are generally from one perspective and don't really allow for multiple interpretations, they're still very useful for a general overview or kind of like a short introduction to something, which is perfect for deciding whether you want to continue looking into it or not. So this is by Cassandra Eason, and this is the description on the back. Understanding and enjoying the tarot. Tarot cards have been used through the years as a method of divination that can offer nuanced personal readings. In this accessible guide, Cassandra Eason introduces the tarot to beginners, from your first reading and suggested ways of laying out the cards to their individual meanings. She also provides real-life readings as examples. So we're going to talk about the introduction, which is understanding and enjoying the tarot. I'm not going to read you the whole introduction because it's lengthy. So I'm just going to read you the first two paragraphs, which are, pretty short. In fact, I would say this book is easily accessible to read because all of the paragraphs are extremely short considering what I'm used to for any other novel, honestly. It's also 1.5 point spaced, it looks like, which leaves it much more accessible to readers. I've noticed that even though you can barely notice the difference between 1.5 and 1 point spacing, it does make it a little bit easier to read if you use 1.5. Okay, tarot card reading is the simplest and one of the most effective methods of discovering your potential future paths, as well as the opportunities and challenges for those for whom you read the cards. In fact, even if you've never used a tarot pack before, from day one you can understand the significance of the cards you've selected by looking at the pictures, relaxing, and letting them guide you to their message. And honestly, for me, I have noticed that's something that Aphrodite does. Like, depending on what pack he uses, he'll be like, oh yeah, this connects to this through, like, the amount of people shown, or, like, the 2 people shown, or, like, the fire in the background. So it's definitely interesting to see it done that way, because I was under the impression that it was all down to, like, what the card's, like, definite meaning is. Which is, in fact, the exact opposite, as both this book and Aphrodite has informed me. So, ultimately for me, this book was definitely more into looking at how the cards apply just to you, like, personally, which is helpful, but depending on how I want to read, may not be the most useful. Like, for every definition of the cards, it's always like, oh, this means this person does this for you, or like, you're about to encounter this. And it's also generally only about the positives. I was also interested in learning about the cards in reverse, because that's something that's always fascinated me. And I have always held to the belief that it generally means like the opposite of what they do mean, so I figure, you can always kind of like figure it out from there. But I'm a rather scientific human, so I do like to have the reverse meanings also laid out for me. So for me, this was a bit less useful to me, because, I don't know, for me, just having every single card being described as you, I don't know, kind of like threw me out of actually reading the definition. It was weird. So I will say there are a lot of useful layouts included in this, and since she did say that, like, you pretty much can interpret cards however, as long as you think about, like, the significance they hold and, like, what they may mean. So There were quite a few different types of layouts that she included for us, and I think most of them proved to be pretty useful. Some of them are pretty simple, some of them are like ways to introduce yourself to your deck and get to know it, and then other ways are like extremely intense spreads that you might only want to do like every 3 months. Again, I really like this like little guide to like what the different cards means. I noticed that it was more in like each suit, like the specific, like, 3 of Wands, like it was more of the, you are going to encounter this. Whereas for the major arcana, there was a bit less of that. But it still kind of bugged me, like having somebody be like, you're going to encounter this, because like, what if I'm not reading for myself? So I think that's just kind of nitpicky of me, I guess. And then we also had some real life examples for each chapter, talking about, because she'd give you a tarot layout at the end of each chapter, and so then that would talk about, so then the real life example after would talk about how somebody used this card layout to help them, which was definitely interesting. I mean, I don't really need to be convinced that it works, so like, I didn't really need it, if you know what I mean. Like, it seemed kind of like a testimonial on like a website that's like, please buy my product. Too late, I've bought tarot cards. You don't need to convince me, I promise. So that part also felt a little bit more like, yeah, I didn't really need to know that. But again, it was probably more of a way to break up the content, because people do get tired of reading just straight information the entire time. So this was definitely used to break up the listing of definitions, so that you didn't have, the definition of 78 cards just straight one after the other. This way we had them broken down into sizable portions with a layout, and then with a real life example, and again, so that we would actually be able to continue concentrating on each of the new definitions as they came. So I can't say that it was well structured as a book. It was made to be easily digestible and readable. I didn't really encounter any new words, except right in the introduction where they were talking about specific aspects that you may experience when you're doing tarot. Everything else was pretty accessible for anybody with even a simple vocabulary. So I can recommend these books as being a good intro to something that you're curious about, but you're a little bit scared of the lingo or of figuring out the right way to do it. I think any and all of these would probably be written with the same hand. I do have 2 more introduction books, one on crystals, one on chakras, and one on Wicca, because I'm just curious about it. I don't know if I'm ever going to actually subscribe to it or not. Most of these things still kind of weird me out a little bit. But I am curious, so I'll be taking a look into them. Honestly, for me, the tarot book was a really easy read. Maybe it took me like an hour, maybe an hour and a half, because I had to keep going back and rereading because I was listening to a YouTube video while I was reading, and the two do not go together conductively. But yes, if you are even the slightest bit curious about tarot, before you, buy anything or go crazy, I would say go check out Aphrodite's, kind of like take a look at his stuff, maybe check a little bit of tarot out of your library to make sure you are actually interested. For the stuff I bought, I did actually go off of Amazon for once in my life, just because I feel like it would be kind of like bad vibes to buy from Amazon, because they're kind of like a capitalistic, greedy company, and you kind of probably don't want to get any universe delving tools from there. I don't actually know if that's true. It just gave me a bad feeling to buy it from them. It was a little bit more expensive, and I probably should have just kept things in my cart while I went through everything else, because instead I had 2 separate orders come from this company. So lovely. I think it's called Llewellyn. I think that's what it's called. I don't remember anymore. I'll have to take a look at my emails. But yes, I'm excited to look into this. I guess I'll let you guys know how it goes, or I won't if I don't remember. But I definitely think that this series is a really good idea. I think it's a great way to make these sort of things far more accessible to people than they normally would be. And I've actually seen a lot of, with the younger generation, a really big surge of, new agey sort of stuff. I guess that's how you describe it. I've seen a lot of witches on TikTok, actually, which is kind of funny. And I've seen a far more, like, pro movement for, like, all of this alternative stuff, like, almost it feels like everywhere I turn. So I just find all of that extremely interesting. Anyways, if you have any observations you'd like to share with me regarding this, if you think that this was a very strange thing for me to bring onto this channel, I'll accept that thought. I hope you enjoyed this pretty short book review / book talk. If you're interested to hear more book talks, hear about writing, hear about D&D, feel free to subscribe. I post that content pretty much every Wednesday and every Friday, occasionally late on Wednesdays. If I forget that it's a Wednesday, I apologize in advance. And I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget that you can find me on Twitter and Twitch as Scholastically Natalie. I do stream games on Twitch, and I don't do much on Twitter because, again, I don't know how to Twitter properly. My prospective field left me never posting anything that could be slightly controversial, and I continue to have that hang up to this day. So I'm just here to talk about YouTube videos and maybe discuss my pets. I don't know. I still don't know what I'm doing. Somebody please tell me how to Twitter properly. Anyways, thank you so much, and that's Scholastically Natalie, out.